What is the single most important nutrient we as diabetics require to significantly lower our A1C levels, control blood sugars, raise insulin sensitivity, which then allows for body fat reductions and an increase of muscle mass? Is it carbohydrates, fats, or protein that regulate eating patterns, which then controls your calorie intake throughout the day? Know the answer to this, and you will never, ever be hungry again. Today, you will learn how to make small, effortless adjustments to your diet that will change your health forever. Welcome to the Resilient Diabetic. This is the channel we turn ordinary, struggling diabetics into extraordinary, well-controlled diabetics. If you are brand new to this new channel, I welcome you. My name is Jay Sampat. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that gray notification bell. That way, you will be alerted when new life-changing episodes have been published. And if you've learned something new today, I would love it if you smashed that like button for me. As with all my videos, this should not be considered personal medical advice. This is my interpretation of the latest research. If you want medical advice, please always consult your physician first. The latest studies are showing nearly 52% of the population is now either pre-diabetic or diabetic. The thing is, I do not believe in the word pre-diabetic. Either you're diabetic or you're not. There is no in between. And I bet once you are diagnosed, your doctor, who by the way has never had a single course in nutrition during his or her medical school training, has instructed you to what? Eat less and exercise more. But those instructions are a death nail, a recipe for disaster, as I bet many of you already know. This leads you down a path of yo-yo dieting, where you do initially, you lose some weight, but then you gain it all back, plus more over time. But what is worse, your diabetes is not controlled the way you want it to, and you're starting to notice your health is deteriorating. So what do? You take matters into your own hand and you go to the internet for advice. The first thing you notice, there's a ton of conflicting nutritional advice. Second, there seems to be two major camps in the diet wars, and they are wars because they're vying for your money. You've got the low-fat, high-carb group, which is sanctioned by your medical care providers, your nutritionists, and your governing health organizations. They then instruct you to limit your meats, especially your red meats. But if you do eat meats, you're to buy skinless, boneless chicken breasts, fat-free dairy. Oh, and if you eat almonds, make sure they're made of egg whites. If you are instructed by today's dietitians, then the base of your diet would include whole grains, breads, and starches. The problem? That is the very thing that created your diabetes in the first place. The difference? You are now instructed to eat less of it, leaving you starving all day long. Then, on the other side of the spectrum, you've got your super low carb keto group, some of which add heaping spoonfuls of butter and coconut oil to their coffee or tea in an effort to eat more fats. The question is, where would both of these dieting models fail you in the end? Neither take into account two critical components of human biology. The first biological trait we all have, and it's a word that's hard to pronounce, is satiety or satiety. You've heard me talk about this many times in my episodes, and we will go into greater detail today as to what this really means. The second hardwired genetic trait we all share is based on the protein leverage hypothesis. Now, this is considered to be the single most important attribute to your diet and whether or not you maintain great health free of any complications for the rest of your life. Critical new studies show that those who understand these two concepts not only easily manage their weight, but get this, they're able to build muscle, lose fat, and most importantly, control their blood sugars. They do not become part of the statistics of worsening health that afflict most diabetics. Let's start with the word satiety. Not exactly a word that rolls off your tongue. Satiety ultimately comes from the Latin word satis, which means enough. Have you ever considered and critically analyzed how you feel after a meal or a snack? Satiety means that you are not stuffed or uncomfortable. After a meal, you should feel full, satisfied, but are no longer hungry or thinking about your next meal or food in general. Yes, you can eat a ton of food and feel full, but that is not what we want. How does satiety work? The feeling of satisfaction is not created by a single mechanism. Instead, it's a combination of several physiological and psychological factors all working together. This would include the physical sensation of your stomach expanding as you eat, how the food smells, tasted, along with the sensory component of the meal. Lastly, the way our hormones and neurotransmitters in our gastrointestinal tract respond to the food we're eating. It sends signals back to the brain, letting it know it has all the valuable nutrients it needs for recovery, growth, and repair. The brain then shuts off the hunger mechanisms. Let me repeat this important point. It's not about calories the body cares about, but the nutrients in the food we eat. Due to the complexity of these actions, it can take up to 20 minutes for the feeling of fullness to kick in. But satiety isn't all about choosing the right foods. It's also influenced by factors independent of the act of eating, such as why are we eating? To simply feed and nourish the body, or because of other emotional, stress-related concerns. Feelings of satiety will ultimately unconsciously influence how soon and how much food and calories you will eat within a day's period. The reason the high-carb, low-fat, or the low-carb, high-fat diet plans eventually fail is because the macronutrient that gets ignored the most, yet has the most powerful effects on satiety, is protein. Dieters who restrict calories and protein throughout the day will feel hungry and deprived. And this is natural and is based on our biological history, our hardwired genes. That is why one would find themselves diving headfirst into a half gallon of ice cream late at night. Or they try to fill up on foods that ultimately provide very little satisfaction, like lettuce, rice cakes, granola bars, carrot sticks, even fat bombs to no avail. My dear friends, this eventually leads to failure, consequently beating yourself up for seemingly out of control junk food cravings, which again is not your fault. Both camps would benefit immensely from learning about the protein leverage hypothesis. Stated most simply, due to our evolution of our species, the protein leverage hypothesis predicts we humans will always prioritize protein first when regulating food intake. In plain English, we are continually driven to consume more and more food until we meet our minimum protein or amino acid needs for the day. The real world implications is that if we don't consume adequate protein, we will overconsume other foods high in carbohydrates and fats in a subconscious effort to obtain those critical missing amino acids. What all the newer studies are conclusively showing, the amount of protein you eat will determine the total energy consumption. Since the appetite for protein is so strong, we will keep eating until we get to our target protein intake. This is why it is so easy to polish off a bag of potato chips or cookies in one sitting. But if we had a steak or eggs or even pork chop, we don't want anything more. Food manufacturers have deviously tapped into our protein cravings by creating savory foods that have protein flavor. We then eat far too much fat and carbohydrates in an attempt to ingest protein. Protein is expensive, so it is far cheaper for the manufacturers to simulate it in their products. And these food manufacturers are in business for what? For profits. They are not there to nourish and to bring you health. Their sole financial incentive is to replace protein with cheaper forms of calories, thus manipulate the sensory qualities of foods to disguise their lower protein content. Hint, hint, another great example of this brainwashing are these new meatless burgers. As protein gets diluted by carbohydrates in the modern food supply, we must eat more carbohydrates to gain that limited protein. So you will keep eating and eating and eating. Why does this occur? Protein is the main component of every cell that makes us who we are. From muscles, bones, organs, skin, nails, our hormones, immune defense cells. At its core, we are part of the animal kingdom and are made of specific sequences of protein. Excluding water, our muscles are composed of about 80% protein, making this nutrient especially important for those of us wanting to retain our independence as we age. And as you already know, it is that muscle that is responsible for soaking up all of that glucose or sugars out of the bloodstream after we've eaten. And it is that muscle that we lose as we age. Our bodies have recently been estimated to contain around 30 trillion cells. And for us non-math majors, a trillion has about 12 zeros. Or another fascinating way of looking at it, that is a million. Each and every cell has a lifespan. It breaks down, becomes damaged, and then has to be either remade or repaired every single day we are alive. This requires a constant influx of these critical building blocks at all times. As you eat protein, they then get digested and broken apart into the individual building blocks, these amino acids. Once absorbed, they are then tracked. Not only does the body know how much has been consumed, but accounts to make sure the right ratios of these key amino acids the body needs for repair and recovery are always available. For example, the proteins that come from plants are made of ratios of amino acids that reflect the structure of plants. And if you have not noticed, we are not plants. That is why you have to significantly overeat plant proteins for the human body to be satisfied. This complicated accounting system triggers that hunger mechanism when the body requires more building blocks. The tragic problem, the cause of all of our metabolic diseases, we are over-consuming excessive calories as both carbohydrates and fats, which then comes with higher body fat levels, insulin resistance, and poor blood sugar control, all because we do not get enough protein. The Institute of Medicine sets the RDA, or the recommended dietary allowance for protein, here in the US. And right now, It is at 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. This is disastrous. Far, far too low in my opinion. Under stressful conditions such as energy restrictions and physical activity, the RDA for protein is no longer an appropriate recommendation. Is there a way to calculate what is optimal for you without having to do any math? How do we know we are consuming the right adequate amounts? And it's actually pretty easy. So I'm going to ask you these few simple questions. Besides being hungry, do you have the strength you've always had? Can you open that jar of pickles with ease? What about your stamina and your energy levels needed for the hectic day-to-day activities? Are you gaining more and more fat through the midsection? If you're female, are your bones in great shape? What about your joints? Are they always hurting? What about if you have been dieting? Are you at an extended stall of fat loss that you just cannot break? Is your morning fasted blood sugars over 100 milligrams a deciliter? What about your A1C? Is it continually in that non-diabetic range? And in my humble opinion, what is ideal for all diabetics? Around 4.7 to around 5.3. If not, this immediately tells you you've been paying far too much attention to fats and carbs and not enough to protein. The body's dynamic and it is always changing. It may have changed now to a point where you have to think outside of the box. Protein requirements, they go up as you age, not down. This is especially true for women. You think just because you've had one egg for breakfast, you've had enough? No, you need to triple that just for breakfast alone to stay healthy. How do we go about correcting these imbalances? First, you don't just jump into a drastic protein intake from one day to the next. It has to be a gradual process. As you add in more, see how you feel. I said in previous episodes, the body will effectively use protein if you break it up into separate meals, not all at once. I would say start with adding in small amounts, an additional 20 grams a day until you've hit what I call the Alleluia moment. That is one where you're no longer thinking about food or wanting to snack on everything, especially your carb-based snacks. You have to find the right range for you based on your age, your activity levels, and other pre-existing health issues. You want good, high biological animal-based protein sources at every meal. Besides protein, animal sources provide essential fat-soluble and B vitamins. They are especially high in vitamin B12, vitamin D, and the anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids, heme iron, and zinc. Beef, for example, is not only an excellent source of iron, zinc, selenium, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin B6, vitamin B12, vitamin D, phosphorus, magnesium, and potassium. But these nutrients in beef are absorbed and utilized by our bodies better than by any other food. What about fats? They are also known to provide satiety. They may not stretch the stomach, but what they do is slow down the digestion process. But there are twofold problems with fats, especially for us diabetics. One, they are calorie dense. When you try and quench that hunger with, say, snacking on macadamia nuts all day, yes, you will control insulin, but you will find yourself in a situation where you will plateau. You're not going to lose any more weight or body fat or improve your health beyond a certain set point. It comes down to this. Why would the body burn its own subcutaneous and intra-abdominal fat stores when you're constantly feeding it fats. Second, and this is critical, if one is only focused in on feeding the body fats and staying in ketosis, then obviously protein is not a priority. What then happens to both your muscle mass and bone density over your lifetime? Yes, your insulin sensitivity may improve, but you may also find your fasting blood glucose levels rise over time. Ultimately, we want foods that are heavier in weight and volume with fewer calories. That always provides greater satiety. And what are the options would that be? Foods high in fiber also cause the greatest degree of satisfaction. Remember, we talked about one of the required physiological processes for satiety to occur. That is the stretching of the stomach. Besides protein, the right fiber-based foods are the key. And which fiber-based foods? Only those low in carbohydrates but extremely high in other nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the antioxidants. This would exclude all wheat-based products and most fruits. The ones we as diabetics flourish on would be your non-starchy, dark green leafy vegetables, your above ground, and let me repeat that again, grown above ground, brightly colored vegetables, your cruciferous vegetables. Fiber also plays a very important role in proper digestion. It can help feed the healthy bacteria in your gut in order to run optimally. Because remember, 70% of your body's immune system is found in your gut. So your diet starts and ends with protein first, and then everything else is built around that. The end result to prioritizing lean protein sources along with a right mix of low-carb vegetables, blood sugars that are not only well controlled, but a body that will require very little insulin, which means low inflammatory levels. Body fat will continue to melt off. Muscle mass may continue to be retained or even built if weight training is concurrently executed. But most importantly for you, you get your life back and refocused on other missions outside of obsessing over being diabetic and the consequences of food. I bet you would love to learn more on the subject, so I'll create 2 important links for you. The first link you will see will be to subscribe to this all-important channel. The second will be the link to the playlist on videos involving diabetic weight and fat loss. So have a great and productive day, and we will see you soon with another new episode, which are generally released weekly. Bye for now.